Hi, this presentation is called The Numerous Options for Apex 18.1 Interactive Grid Validations. My name is Matt Mulvaney and I work for a company called Explorer. Explorer solve problems with Oracle technology. We develop bespoke applications and we support our customers. So if you take the verbs from those three sentences, that forms our logo. Explorer, solve, develop, support. You can see from the rosettes in the middle, we are winners of the UK OUG Database Partner of the Year for the last 4 years, and we also hold the Systems Partner of the Year award for 2018-19. I work in the development team, and we specialise in Oracle Application Express. Explorer have Oracle Cloud Systems Practice, we've engineered Systems Practice, and we provide Oracle support to our customers. So I'm Matt. I've got many years working in Oracle technologies. All my career has been working with PL SQL. I spent 13 years working with forms and reports, and over the last few years working exclusively with Oracle Application Express. And I use my forms and reports experience quite a lot recently with several forms to Apex redevelopment projects. So my day-to-day tasks involve being a trainer. We have several Apex courses, a speaker, events in UK, Ireland and across Europe. I'm a blogger, but ultimately I'm a consultant and a developer. And I take these opportunities to promote and enthuse about Oracle Apex. I hold the Oracle ACE Award. I'm the Apex World Member of the Month for August this year and June last year. And I'm also the author of Tablock Chrome extension. This is a popular Chrome extension. It's totally free. There's over 500 users using this. It provides some extra functionality for the Apex developer in terms of revealing page item values, hidden values, and also assisting writing of code by quick links to Apex items. So the agenda for today is I want to talk about Apex validations, and we'll start from the basics and we'll talk about some inconsistencies that I see, and then move on to these lowish code client validations. So we've heard about low code. This is lowish because it involves typing into one of the fields to provide some extra HTML5 attribute validation. Then I want to explain about client validations versus server validations, the differences between the two, and that will lead on to talking about a shift in how pages are submitted with the introduction of the interactive grid, and then I'll spend much of the presentation talking about interactive grid, cell, row and model validations, and I'll try to explain as much as I can about how client validation can assist with the user's general validation requirements. And you can see from the icons at the bottom, this runner is starting to run and then it's crossing the line. This is because at the start of the presentation we'll be talking about how you can apply client validations to your forms, and then we'll apply those techniques, or either the same techniques or a variation of that to the interactive grid. Okay, but first I've got a question for you. Can you tell me what's the easiest validation you can think of? The easiest to do, the easiest to write? So I hope you're thinking about the required field. Okay, we'll explain what that means. So I'm going to edit the item here. It's a very simple form. I've got a field called required and I've got a submit button. Now this is an optional floating label, but the important thing is values required. So before we test this, actually I'm going to put debug mode on. So if I submit the page, it says contact errors before saving, OK button, and this says please fill in this field. Now remember what this looks like. This overlay, this message, I can move the message around, that kind of thing. Okay, so I can submit it very quickly. I'm pressing spacebar now to get rid of it. And if I look at the debug, you can see that the last thing was the show, which was me turning the debug on 24 seconds ago. But since then, there's been no page activity in production of that validation. So this, for me, is a client validation. Yep. Now if we get the value correct, type in some values, it's okay. If we remove it, it sticks on the page. So this is working as I expected. Now, what Apex does is, whenever you set the required field, it sets an attribute called required. Just find it. There we are, required. So what if a hacker, experienced user, developer, that kind of person, was to remove it? Now, what would happen now if I press submit? So, do you think it's going to allow me to submit the page and break the security, possibly entering a null value into my database, probably breaking my data model? Or do you think that Apex is sophisticated enough to catch this and prevent the page from being submit? Let's see. Okay, so submit the page there, and it's caught it. So it's saying required must have some value. So it's not quite the same. I can't drag this one around. This message is different as well. The overlay is gone. It's completely different, to be honest. If I check the debug log, it's accepted the page. So it's submit the page. If I look at the debug, and I'm going to search for validations. So this is the validations here. It's going to run through these validations, which I have none. And then it says perform basic and predefined validations. Validate is not null for P5 required. Aha, so without me creating a special explicit validation here, it's had this second layer of validation, a server-side validation to catch it. So this is pretty good. I don't have to write anything special. This is working as I expect it. It's protecting my data. So this is available to other item types such as color picker, number, date, that kind of thing. Let's move on to pop-up LOV. So the same thing. Let's edit the page. This is page 7. We've got P7 required. Optional floating label. I could set it required, but it looks the same. You know, there's no real difference. Value required is yes. So I expect if I was to pick null, this looks like a list of departments, I'll be presented with that client validation message. So in fact, I don't see it, and it's done a server-side validation. I know it's a server-side validation because I can see the submit there, and I can see the same thing. Perform basic, predefined, validates not null for P7 required. So even though, let's do the same test, even though it's got the required field on the item, there it is, it has no effect. So it doesn't honour those client-side validations. And let's say due to an Apex bug, this is how it this is why it occurs. So I would like to see that in future versions, that is consistent across all items. It's just a recap. So we've learnt from that the required is server-side as well as client-side, and it actually doubles up using this basic validation checks which we saw in the debug. So there's other inconsistencies, not only pop-up LOV but also checkbox radios and shuttles. Shuttles, and I should say, are better in 18.2, where the validation appears in red on the selected side, which of course, if it's null, there are no selected values, and so there's plenty of space for that red text to appear. So in preparation for this presentation, I thought I better do some research on the validations itself with reading the documentation. So this came from Apex documentation. I was trying to find what the Oracle say a validation is, and they say a validation is an edit check, and it goes on to explain there's page items validations. I get those. Page validations? Well, yes, but I thought those were like a 4.2 thing. And then there's column and row in tabular, no mention of interactive grid. The page could probably do with an update, in my opinion. And this is the 18.2 documentation. And it also says text entered for validations may not exceed 3950 characters. When I see something like this, I've got to test it out, and I managed to get a validation over 3950 characters. So we've seen some validations are server-side, some are client-side already. We'd like to know, which is which. So we're going to have a look at numbers for these. So on the numbers side of things, Just ignore this little bit for the moment. We've got one field on the page. It's got a template of optional again. Again, it makes no difference whether that's optional or required, as long as you got this required value set to yes. We've also got a maximum length of 2, so I can only type 2 characters in, and a min and max value of 10 and 100. So, number of presentations that you have seen today, well, that are on today, between 10 and 100. So, first thing is, let's test this works with a client-side validation. Submit the page. It says correct errors before saving. Good. Please fill in this field. Good. This is a client-side validation. Now, let's get this right. So, 87 presentations today. It works. Let's get this wrong. 7 presentations today. Alright. So, number of presentations today, 10 to 100 is not between the value range. Okay, it's the server side. It's done the min and max checks on the item at server side, which is a bit annoying because I would kind of like this as a client-side validation, 10 and 100. Now, the reason it can't do this as a client-side validation is because those min and max appear for input type numbers, and due to cross-browser and UI factors, Apex uses an input type of text for numbers instead of number. So this means you can't use the min and max values, and that's why they don't appear here. So it can't do it client-side, so the alternative is it's got to do it at server. Yep. But also max length appears there, so that's 2. So I can write 98, 99, but I can't write 100 in. I'm trying to press some zeros there, and 100 just wouldn't actually go in. So perhaps an experienced developer, user, hacker could hack the page. I could put 20 characters in now. Yeah, so put big values in. So let's put 100 in. So I've managed to circumvent the security here. As a developer, I said no more than 2 characters, but someone's managed to squeeze in 100 in. Again, potentially breaking my data model, potentially breaking things and doing things that I don't want them to do. And there was no server-side validation for that. No, managed to bypass that, which is odd because this says validation. Maximum length 2, so why isn't it validating that? And in fact, these settings, which didn't appear in the markup, were actually validations. So it's a bit confusing. For me, I'd probably have this min and max in validation, and this maximum length probably over there, and that makes more sense to me. Okay, now before we move on, I just want to give you a really quick introduction to what we can do to get this to validate in client side, and this is using a pattern and a data validation message. So I won't talk too much about this, but because we'll cover it later. So I'm going to type into custom attributes pattern. Now this says 10 to 100. I know it makes not a lot of sense, but I'll explain how I got that bit later on. And then this data valid message, which overrides the default message 10 to 100, please. So now if I get validation wrong, put 4 in. We've got our client side. We've got this special message in there. Yeah. So that works really well. If I didn't have the special message in there, it defaults down to the basic one. Yeah. So try 4. Well, try 4. Here we go. Please match the format requested. Okay. And before we move on and do the recap, then this is actually a number field. Again, Apex doesn't use this, but it supports the min and max, and it's also got something called step. So the default is step of 1. I can't go past or below 10, and I can't go above 100. Okay, but Apex doesn't use that one. Okay. So we've learnt the 3 things already about the required doubles up, the pop-up LV has inconsistencies. Number validation, having consistency 2, and don't support HTML5 validation attributes for that min, max, range, step, that kind of thing. Apex validations are always server-side. Okay, so Apex validations are server-side. So I've got an Apex validation here. I've put it on never. Now, this is what I would have to do if I wanted to check that maximum number of characters. I would have to create a server-side validation. Now, I know these are server-side. These are not client-side. And the giveaway is these PL SQL ones. So SQL rows, SQL, PL SQL. So those cannot run on the client. They must run on server. That's the giveaway. These are all server-side. And in fact, it's passed it after submit. So you know full well they are server-side validations. Okay, so where can you find the declarative client-side validations? Well, they're inconsistent and they don't have a special place for it, so they're probably not very well placed at all, even when interactive grid requires it even more so. So I usually think of the interactive grid as, and I always think of this example, your user can put in multiple records of data or edits multiple records of data, deleting some records as well, and when they come to press the save button, telling them it's wrong at that point is too late. You know, they want to be told as soon as they potentially get something wrong, so they can correct it straight away. So you might be curious why I am hacking the page so much. Well, this is because web clients cannot be trusted. You can add extra values into select lists. You can change different option sets. You can do various things. So I never trust a web client, and it's a good security test as well. So go back to this example. Do I need any extra validations in there as well? Okay. No. Okay. Onto the lowest code validations. So onto demo this. There's more items and more items interactive grid. So on this example, we'll do a form, and then we'll do a grid version of it. So you see there's name, URL, email, date, departments, number of presentations, and then we've got the same interactive grid here. I don't have a date field because we'll come on to that later on. Okay, and then that'll mark the point where we switch over to grid. So you can see I've got some required fields here. So straight away I'm going to submit the page. Okay, two things wrong with the page. So put my name in, number of presentations, 50. All's good. All's not good. So I've been told there wasn't actually 2 validation errors, but there's 3. So I've got to fix departments now. Why is that wrong? It's a pop-up LV. Remember that. So I should be able to submit the form now. So all's good. Yeah. Okay, I've got these special ones here. I've got these URL ones. These are called subtypes. So please enter a URL, and you can use subtypes kind of with interactive grid, and I'll show you how you can get those working and explain that it's not so straightforward as items. So with text field, you set the subtype to URL. It defaults to text, but you can change it to email, phone number, URL. And I've got the same with email, text field, subtype, email. So this says please enter a valid URL. No problem. I'll put a valid URL in. This is Explorer's website. Oh, it's still wrong. So you've got to put, in fact, HTTP like that, or HTTPS, and that works. Email address. Going to put the @ sign. It says it's quite good with the email. It tells you exactly what's wrong with it. So please insert a @ sign at the email address. Okay, I've got one in. Are you good with that? No. Part following is incomplete. Okay, I'll put a following part in. Oh, they're not symbol. Right. Okay, I'm messing about, but that should get through client side validation now. With the date field, you know, dates, users usually use the picker, but you can do something crazy like put your name in there instead. If you do that, you know, big clue here, server side validation, date doesn't match, so we'll fix that a bit later on. Right, a few things I want to show you is you can get the validity of the item. So this says P3 name is valid. You know what if I remove that? What's it say now? False. What if I go back a step? Got some validity state here. It gives me everything about the valid state. If it's a bad input, step mismatch range, valid, value missing true. So that's the reason why it's not valid. Yeah, just picking the attribute valid off the end. You can set the custom validity. So here, what's your name? Changing the message there. And this will be overwritten by that data value message we saw earlier. We can check the whole page. Validate false. Okay, what about if we do this, get something wrong here, validate the whole page, it tells you there. Now this is a bit annoying that I can get things potentially wrong here and it doesn't tell me to the end. So I can use this validate items on blur. On blur means when you lose focus of an item. So if I lose focus of that, yeah, lose focus, that's good. What about that? Yeah, so this is pretty good. So that's a very good way of validating things. But however, that is undocumented. It's been around for a little while, but it's undocumented, so use with caution there. All these client-side validations, by the way, can be circumvented if you do apex.submit, and you can call that in JavaScript. And then all these are bypassed, and we're on to the server-side ones here. So let's get a good example. So I've got URL and email wrong, and submit the page. It's just bypassed it all. But you can use this apex submit validate true, and it runs as client-side validation. So consider running this version instead of that version, yeah? Okay, another way of circumventing, you see I'm hacking the page a bit, just remove the subtype. Subtype is text. It's going to go through that time, so it doesn't complain about that. Okay, so consider those things. Right, let's switch over. Interactive grid. So with an interactive grid, you'll see I've got a name here. I've put a star in the label to make it clear that it's required. So if I remove my name, as soon as I press tab, move off the field, it goes red. Why has it gone red? So it says please fill in this field. So I don't need Apex page validate items and blur. I've just crossed that out because the grid does it for you, which is really cool. Put the name back in and it's fixed it. Now I've got URL subtype here, so please enter a URL. What about that one? No, I've got the email wrong now. Okay, so let's get the email. Tells us specifically what's wrong with it. I've got the dot there. URL. Yep, that's good. You see, it's not so sophisticated as the URL regular expression there. So I can save, all should be good. Now, how do we do this? So let's edit the page. The name, obviously. I've got a value required somewhere. There's a filter. Value required, I've got maximum length on that. I've also got a tooltip as well. This is handy. So if a name, you think, well, what actually is it? Is it first name, last name, middle name? So you see that tooltip there, enter your full name. So there are, the grid has got a native way of doing this, but a very easy way of doing it is just put a title. Title equals enter your full name. So it works pretty well. The native way of doing it can look across columns as well and dynamically build your tooltip. So you can take your pick really. So that's a required URL. Now I said if you want subtypes, set the type to text field and then change the subtype to, in fact the subtype doesn't even appear for text items in the interactive grid, which is a bit annoying. So, however, it can be quickly fixed that functionality can be restored with a dynamic action. So I run this on row initialization. So row initialization, when you click into the row, so when you click into the row, it kind of reveals the IDs. So if we look at that, it says static ID of the column, which I call in C URL. Change the type to URL. In email, change the type to email. That easy, and you can run that in page load as well. That works perfectly fine. And that's all you need. That's all you need to do it. That works particularly well. Now department. I've removed this from being a pop-up LOBV for now. This is because we're going to come back to that later. This is a select list, so I can change something to like government sales. Change is saved. Now I can also turn my hack on, and through the console I can edit the options in there and force something in there which shouldn't be there. Saved it, and I managed to save the value 19. This is showing because it's showing extra values. So there's no second level of security of that. I managed to hack the grid somewhat, and it can hack your pages like this as well. So should you need some kind of explicit validation, probably so. Probably so. You need to do that. Let's put that back. Salary. Let's put a big salary in. I've got that pattern range again to protect that. Yeah. All these things can, of course, be circumvented with the Apex submit. Any grid on a page will be submit. So this is why you probably need those extra validations in there at server side to catch anything like this. Okay, save. In fact, if you're interested in a regular expression, I found this one, which is 1347 characters, which validates a URL. I found that on the internet by googling it. So that would be a pretty secure one. Okay, let's move on. So beyond the server-side validation, we know that we could use required, we could use subtypes, we can use pattern matching. We use pattern quite a bit, and it can do more things other than ranges, such as checking for spaces, checking for invalid characters, checking for each letter of each word is initialized, that kind of thing. Those ranges that I was using, by the way, they look like this, quite complex. Just use a website like this, which you can type in number ranges, and it generates the pattern for you. So it's dead easy, really. Right, beyond the server-side validation, so page submissions, the client-side validations are triggered by submitting the page via buttons. So there's a special association between compatibility mode and buttons, which submit. Apex page submit validate true, calls any client-side validations. You've also got Apex page validate, also works with grids on the page, and Apex page validate acts as blur if using a form, although a grid is not required. You've got validity obtained by get validity, gives you a bunch of statistics here. You can also get the validation message, you can set the validation message, but however, if the data valid message has already been set as an attribute, you cannot override that. If you're going to use data valid message, note that this is written in English. If you have multilingual application, which is native in Apex, then you would want to find and replace those data valid messages using probably like a page zero dynamic action. There's a blog by Marko Grichki, and he has the same problem, and he's solved it by using just that dynamic action on page 0. Right, so let's look at validation comparison. Let's compare client versus server. So server side is the last line of Apex defense to protect your data from your processes. It's not the last line of defense. So the last line of defense would be your database table constraints, column positions, trigger validations, that kind of thing. That would be the last line of defense. A server validation cannot be circumvented. Now I've been rewording this sentence. Cannot, difficult, impossible, perhaps could be. I'm quite happy with cannot be circumvented. Client side is quite easy. We've been doing that a few times already. A server side validation is slower. So you sometimes see the spinner loading the page. It's got to run it on the server. It's got to get the explain plan sometimes, and it's just expensive. On the client, you've got faster response times, great for the grid, reduced network server load, and you've got this thing called preservation of client state, and there's some examples below. So the preservation of client state, what does that mean? So in earlier versions of Apex, it used to be like this. You would complete your page, you'd post it, and you would redirect. Now think about branches, reloading the page up, and then it would get the new page. So when you post the page, the client side is destroyed, and a validation would stop this circle going round. So what is in the client state? Things like scroll position, anything that was focused, anything that was last selected. If you browsed a file and the file's no longer there again, you've got to browse them for the file again and try to upload it. That's because the client state has been destroyed. Any password fields, like please enter your password, please confirm your password, you've got to do it all over again. You've probably seen this. This is because the client state is destroyed. Now when the interactive grid comes along, they've got a lot of information all at client side. You know, you've got a tremendous amount of information at client side. So this, for me, is a complex page. You've got 2 grids, 2 widgets, 2 models, 2 sets of reports. This one's got 3 reports. This one's got 2 reports. Not only that, you've got master detail. So when I click on accounting, you see the people who work in the accounting. Click on research, people who work in research. You've got an error state on each of the rows. You've got loads of things really. I could go on and on and on. So when you submit the page and there's an error, you can't have all that destroyed. That needs to persist. So with the interactive grid, there's a new solution which is called the Ajax submit process. So you fill in the page, you submit it through Apex, and an error will be displayed. So you need a new way of displaying errors, which is the Apex message, and then you reload on success. Now that's set at page level. You can change that to always or reload on success. If you need if you have a grid on the page, you cannot save the page unless you set that to be reload on success. So new solution, new problems. With interactive grid validations, it requires a lot of custom CF code. It doesn't really tie into declarative server-side validations. You've got this localization problem, which I'll explain to you in a moment. You've got issues with the interactive grid master detail, where it's hard to find errors. Client validations or server-side validations. So the icons mean at the bottom mean location issue, lots of JavaScript, confused developer. So is it still worth it really with all this JavaScript and the like? Preservation client state is no longer an issue. You've got fast response times and reduced network server load. Well, for the first one alone, yes, it's definitely worth it, especially with the grid. So let's apply this to the grid and let's look at the localization issue and work around. So the localization issue, let's look at this new page. So we've got a list of employees. Notice that Donald has no salary, and that's a required field there. Let's change something. Let's change into Don. And I've collapsed the region. Yeah, no problem. This is a region which is got a template of collapsed. So this is normal. You could have, this could be a big page. This is a very simple page, but this could be a big page with lots of grids in behind, visible or not visible. You could have region display selector. You could have collapsible regions. You could have your own plugins which hide various content. So I'm submitting the page. Side must have some value. Okay, let's go back a few steps. Let's just edit this page. Right, let's go back a few steps and repeat that test. So here we go. Change the guy's name, press submit. This is the localization issue. So I'm clicking on to go to the error, and because it's on a hidden region, I can't see it. So it's just not loading up. So the answer to this is, well, my workaround to this is something called the add visibility check. So not often used, it belongs to the Apex message, and it accepts a function, and it passes into that function an ID. So let's see what it sends us. Let's just console log the ID. So it tells us it's emp, which is the static ID of this region. Well, this is not too helpful, is it? I'd like to know, which row, which ID, which column, what's a possible value error. But anyway, let's go beyond this. So let's say, is it a region? Because we could get anything in the ID. We could get a page item. Yeah, so if it's a page item, add visibility check gives you the actual item, which is the problem, which is better than giving us the whole region ID. So if it's a region, I want us to expand the region and focus on the first error. So let's have a look at what those are. I had to write this myself. So expand region, use a blog entry from Jackie. She says if it's got the class is collapsed, then just click the expand button and focus the first error. Well, the grid seems to put this class is error on it, on anything with an error. So if you've got, well, if you find an error, just go to the first one, and we'll see how that works now. Okay, same thing. Click it, pops up in the grid, goes to the item. So that's my workaround. So that you could use the add visibility check on a grid or on a form, and hopefully it would help. Now let's look at something completely different. Let's look at the master detail. So on the master detail, I've got a check here that countries belonging to regions in the master must have at least one character. So you see, I click on Americas, you see America, Australasia, got different countries. Now let's change France. I'm just going to call it F, and then we'll click on Americas. We'll click around a bit, and we'll press save. And it says country name must be 2 more characters. The visibility check says the error is in countries. Oh, great. Which country is that? We can't find that one. Was it in Middle East? No. Is it in Americas? No. Is it in Europe? Ah, there it is. So this is very, very tricky to find where the error exists. And my workaround to this is I have no workaround. So if anyone's got any thoughts on this or any solutions on that, I'd be very happy to know how you've got a workaround to that issue. Okay, let's just recap a little bit. So the add visibility check can help for localization issues when using server-side validations. That's an example. Or if you call Apex message show errors and then you hook in the item value, that's passed to the visibility check. So you could use that. It can't help for any like pattern matching, required fields. It doesn't help with that. Not a lot can help with master detail, as we've seen. So let's go back to the first thing we saw, which is the pop-up LOV issue again, and we'll look at date validations and single row view. So 3 in 1 here. So this is a pop-up LOV. If I pick null there, you see how annoyingly the pop-up LOV, when you've chosen something, goes right down to the bottom of the page. Yeah, so it didn't tell me about the problem there. Let me just change somebody else. I just only want one error. Okay, let's null there, fine. Null there, fine. Save. Ah, now we've got a server-side validation. Now imagine an operator was putting in 100 employees and they didn't know what department it was, and then they press save, and then, oh, I didn't know it was not null, and I've got to pick them all again. So I'd quite like to know whenever I was changing department or something, that there's an error on the page. So So my workaround to this is I have a dynamic action on the change of department, and I just say, I'm keeping this simple. I'm trying to keep all the JavaScript simple here. If it's null, it's valid. Otherwise, it's an error. I want to set the custom validity of that node to be contain this message, and we'll see some messages on the screen as well, just to tell us it's gone wrong. Okay, so let's try it. Search for null. Hey, you've got an error there. We can click that error. The validity, a visibility check tells us which column it is, which is better than telling us that it is the whole region. We've got a message there that can't be null. Great, we fixed it. Yeah, so that's a workaround for that. Right, hire date. So I showed you before on the more items that dates could not be validated at client side. There's a workaround to this as well. So let's put some valid dates in, like not that one. Some valid dates. So let's change the year there. That's all valid. 27th Feb. Let's try something else. The 47th of August. Ah, that's invalid. This year. Ah, that's an invalid year. What's the error? Let's hover over it, and it says must be in DDMONYYY format. Okay, how does that work? Very, very similar. This says, rather than is null, it says is date, and it changed the set custom validity to that message. If it's valid, it sets it to null, removes the message. Yeah. So what is date? Well, I just searched on Google for JavaScript regular expression to validate a date using DDMMYYY. Came back with this example. I've not really read into it. It returns a true or false. Seems to work really well actually. And I'm validating things as I leave the items. So that's really, really good. Now let's have a quick look at single row view. So some users might prefer to use a form in single row view than using the grid, and especially when there's lots of columns sliding left and right, is more difficult than looking at a form searching horizontally. So I've got not null validations. I'll leave the item. That works. Also works for my date as well. So I didn't have to try extra hard to do that. It just works in the grid. Email, if I have subtypes working, that will be fine as well. Okay. Row validations and warnings and workarounds. So row validations. So back to my grid, I'm going to search for stock. So I've got a special rule that says stock managers cannot earn more than 10,000. So I've got some stock managers, stock clerks here. Okay, so a stock clerk can earn a lot of money, over 10,000. No problem. A stock manager cannot earn more than 10,000. See, error. Quite clearly, that is an error. Save. Contact us before saving. So yes, I'm being a bit sarcastic here. It's not very clear that there's an error there. That's because I've set the row to be an error. And you can see the row is an error because if you hover over this very, very small triangle, it says the error, stock managers cannot earn more than 10,000. So really, there's two ways of causing this validation. I can be a stock manager and then gain a high salary like this one, or I could be not a stock manager with a high salary and then move to be a stock manager with a high salary. And when I move off that record, you see that it's invalid now, and I've got this correct as before saving. So I do this through a dynamic action, and I do this stop manager's 10k limit, and that runs after Apex end record edit, which is a custom one, which means when I leave the record. I'd like to see that dynamic, I'd like to not use custom, I'd like to click on this one. So this one is saying, this is stop manager another 10,000. Well, if it's not that condition, it's valid, otherwise that. And I'm going to set the validity of the record to be null. In fact, this Apex end record edit is fantastic because it gives you this data, which gives you the whole model, which gives you the record ID. It's fantastic, gives you everything you need. So I'm going to say I want to set the column ID, job ID, and salary to be in an error state. This makes more sense. It's more clearer to the developer, to the user. So stop manager. This is better, I've got a triangle there. The error is in the row, and I've got something there. Yeah, so that's better. And which one do I fix? Well, it depends, really. It depends. The stop manager job could be wrong, or the salary could be wrong here. I've got to fix it. Before we move on, this validation, I'm setting things to error, but what if I set things to warning? I've not really seen many blogs about this or anyone talking about this, but it could have a use for you in your applications. So stop manager, it goes this like amber warning. Hover over it, stop managers cannot earn more than 10,000, and the same with this thing here. It's not quite as clear here, so possibly it's advisable to, if you can, highlight a column. And if I press save, no problem. So the warning state does not prevent me from submitting that grid there. Now, we've had a look at individual columns through dynamic actions. Oh, we've actually got a validation here as well. This is a server-side validation. The manager is not the employee. So if you want to do a grid validation, you must remember to use editable region here. If you don't, it's going to think it's page items. So this prevents things like Adam Fripp being the manager of Adam Fripp. Yep, and that's the server side, and you see that as the server side. So there's you could do a client validation on that the same way we've done it, but this is a server side one for now. Okay, right. Let's change that back. So the problems with like this one is if I set this back to a error state and cause an error, this Apex end record edit only fires when you change records. If you went straight for the save button like that, it doesn't fire that trigger causing that validation. So we're going to fix that in another example, and the example we're going to do is model validations and workarounds. So on here I want to introduce a salary cap of the departments. So everybody working in, say, the shipping department, I'll just activate that, cannot earn more than 100,000 combined. So shipping's here. Let's do some. Okay, you need a low salary. Fine. Here we go. Some massive salaries have caused it. So that's working. We're over budget here. So this works, and it validates the model, and it doesn't tell us which record is in error because it can't tell us which record is in error. I set that one the last to be at 300,000, but the problem could be this guy is too much as well. So this guy needs to have a salary reduction. So it makes no point in saying which record is wrong, and the same thing could apply to a grid where you don't want any duplications. Say you've got days of the week, Monday to Friday, and you've got 2 Fridays in there. That would be a form of validation on duplicates. Yep. So, like I said earlier, the same thing can be bypassed if I press save. And I've bypassed it all. So what I do tend to do is swap that button out. So the save button there, if I have a look at the JavaScript initialization code, make that a bit bigger. So again, I've tried to keep this minimal. It is 20 lines. I'm popping off or deleting the save button and then pushing on my new save button, and when you click this check save button, it calls this dynamic action called new save button. And under new save button, what it's been doing all the time is invoking the save. Now I could hook on a check my function. It's a salary cap bust. And if I do that, press save, it catches it there. But of course, back to that page submit thing. If I submit the page, oh, I've got server validation here. No problems, that's still over budget. Submit the page, it still allows it to go through. So I need to catch that again somewhere else. And the way I catch it is on a dynamic action before page submit. And I say, just allow that one through. So basically, if the salary cap is fine, then cancel the event. Just stop the whole submit process, and this works really well. So submit the whole page, and it checks the over budget there. So coming towards the end now. So in summary, we looked at the Apex basic validations. We looked at the documentation, what that says. We've got this Loish code. They're using the pattern and the data value message. We talked about the data, the client validations versus server validations, the destruction of the client state, why there was a shift in how pages are submitted, and then we looked at columns, declarative validations, row validations, model validations, single record view validations. A few more things, such as the pop-up LOV workaround. So I hope you found that beneficial. This is the URL for our website, explore.uk.com/blog. We've got over 100 Apex blogs. And if you want to contact me about this presentation, then feel free on this email below. Thank you for your time.